Luis Alvarez, the CEO of Alvarez Technology Group, is here with us to talk about another kind of tax which states and the federal government are trying to wrap their arms around. Thanks for joining us, Luis.
It is my pleasure. And, taxes is everybody's favorite subject, so I'm really excited about talking about that.
Well, I'm just collecting my receipts right now. My dining room table looks horrifying as I try to figure out what my plan is. Yeah, what's my plan for this year? So what about internet taxes? How do these play into the state and federal coffers?
That's a really good question. As you know, I think it's hard to find anyone who hasn't used the internet to buy something, but yet online sales still represent less than 10% of all retail sales, although it's growing pretty quickly year over year. And one of the reasons that a lot of people like to buy online is that they often get to avoid paying sales tax. Mm-hmm. Sometimes that could be a substantial amount of money, but in the process, they're really infuriating local brick and mortar store owners who have been complaining of losing sales to online retailers because, those stores can't avoid paying sales tax.
Now, some economists have gone so far as to say the internet is the end of brick and mortar stores, but we heard about movie theaters, were going to go out of business when videos and DVDs and Netflix came out, right?
Yeah, I think that the death of brick and mortar stores is very premature. But, in the case of taxing internet purchases, those online tax advantages may be changing. The Supreme Court has decided, just at the end of last year, the Supreme Court decided that states can tax internet sales even if the retailer doesn't have a real physical presence in the state, which used to be the big determining factor in whether they could charge sales tax or not.
Mm-hmm. Now, out of curiosity, on what basis did the Supreme Court make that ruling?
Well, I'm not a lawyer, nor do I pretend to be, but the case in question seems to stem back to 2008 when the state of New York enacted a law that stretched the meaning of, this physical presence thing to include affiliates of online retailers. Mm-hmm. And for those people that are familiar with online stores, affiliates are basically small players that sell products through companies like Amazon and Overstock.com. And because they're sometimes located in the state of New York said, well, you have a physical presence here. Amazon begged to differ and sued, claiming that the affiliates did not meet the traditional meaning of physical presence in the state. And after 5 years, the Supreme Court said, you know what, now we side with New York. And in the process, they're opening up a whole big can of worms.
That's what happens with these Supreme Court rulings, that they tend to have this ripple effect. So from a technical standpoint, what are the states doing to get at this revenue?
Well, first of all, the states that want to force sales tax on online sales argue that they're missing out on more than $24 billion in taxes annually. And this is money that would otherwise go into state coffers if people purchase these things locally. Online retailers counter that internet sales are really a different beast and represent a new way of doing business and shouldn't be subject to the same old sales tax laws that traditional retail sales are. Unless, of course, that company has a physical presence in that state, such as an office or a distribution facility in the case of somebody like Amazon. Mm-hmm. In fact, there are many proponents that argue that online retailers should not be subject to sales tax at all, that it should all be, tax-free. One example is that the legislators in the state of Arizona are proposing a new law that would cut the state income tax by the same amount that any new sales tax that's imposed on online sales increases those taxes.
So Arizona plans to rebate the internet sales tax through a deduction on your income tax? Is that what we're saying?
And that's exactly what they're saying. Well, it's not surprising for a state like Arizona that, pretty much is out there sometimes. Remember, they're the one holdout when it comes to daylight savings times, too. So, they're kind of known to march to a beat of a different drummer, so to speak. But back to my point, the fact is online sales are only going to continue to grow over time, and they're going to represent a bigger chunk of the retail business. And states and other municipalities that depend on sales tax as a source of revenue aren't just going to ignore that for much longer. Even those diehards who fight against any sales tax will find themselves on the wrong side of the argument in time.
So are we going to see different internet sales tax policies for every single state now?
Well, that is the big question. Left to the states and localities, the sales tax system would be pretty cumbersome and burdensome for online retailers that sell across state lines.
Yeah.
So there's currently a move in Congress to create a more uniform system to manage sales tax for online sales everywhere in the country. The Senate passed legislation, but right now it's being held up in the House, where Republicans are dead set against any new taxes, or are refusing to bring it up even for debate. In the end, though, they're going to have to do something or face the wrath of both the brick and mortar stores back in their districts and online retailers that contribute to their campaigns.
Yeah, but can you even imagine if every state had their own internet sales tax regulations? For a national distributor, just trying to keep up with that would be impossible.
Yeah, well, as a business that has a presence and sells across just one state, the state of California, I can tell you, managing our sales tax reporting at the end of the month and the quarter, it can be a real big hassle. I couldn't imagine what it's like for somebody like an Amazon or a Overstock.com or Best Buy, where they have to deal with all these municipalities, every little state, every little city that has its own specific version of a sales tax. So there really is a desire to kind of get an umbrella policy, if you will, across the entire country, where online sales would be subject to a unique sales tax that then would be parsed out based on the places where things were purchased. So they would go to the states, but not necessarily the municipalities.
So really, the tax advantage for ordering online would be neutralized. It wouldn't matter if you went to a local store or you bought it online. You'd pay the same tax, or is there some possibility you'd pay a greater tax for ordering it online?
Well, that's the question, and that's where this thing gets bogged down. Some people have proposed something like a value-added tax, which is very popular in Europe.
Yeah.
And where you just pay one tax and be done with it. And some people are saying, well, what happens if the local tax is higher and those brick and mortar stores still lose out sales? But in the end, I think that what you're going to find is that, like many things, online sales represents a whole new area of regulatory opportunity, if you will, for Congress, and they're not going to let that opportunity go by without getting involved in some capacity.
Well, as a business person, and I realize I never look at this as a government official, but just as a business person or a consumer, you're already paying a tax. The tax is called shipping.
Yeah, shipping and handling, absolutely.
You're paying shipping and handling, so there's already a tax associated with online sales.
And that's actually one of the things that works in favor of the brick and mortar stores, because you can just go in and pick up your own goods and not have to pay for that. And right now that advantage is it's okay, but over time I think that's going to erode if sales taxes continue to be an issue.
Yeah, I agree with you. Well, I'm not a guessing woman, but with the states in so much financial trouble, I would wager a bet that they're going to find a way to tax internet sales to their benefit. We are out of time today, but as always, thanks for bringing another perspective to this tax issue. Appreciate it.
You're welcome, Rebecca. This is Luis Alvarez from the Alvarez Technology Group, reminding you that when it comes to technology, forewarned is forearmed.